that everyone who believes in God should pursue truthfulness. And there's an inner truthfulness one must desire, as you correctly described, mastering the self. So defeating the arrogance, defeating the greed, defeating the boastfulness, the attitude of lording oneself over another person. We have to defeat that. And defeating that means to say we will embrace or we will achieve some sort of truthfulness. And when we pursue and we are loyal to truth, that truth will take us where God wants us to be.
Test the claim.
Okay.
Okay.
No product placement. Let me get. Brother Abdullah.
We're ready.
Yeah, anytime.
We're ready to bounce.
Absolutely.
All right.
You approached me about having a discussion about truth and about truthfulness. And I take it you are interested in understanding the approach to these principles, perhaps from any worldview, from any direction, and the meaning of these principles to different peoples with different ideologies and so on. So do you have any way you want to ask me a question, or?
Well, the question is, my journey in life has been a journey for the pursuit of truth. That's my journey. And a lot of people that I come in contact with, quite significant amount of people who dispute, argue, and have different perspectives of truth, they make that claim that what they have is truth, what they have should be prevailed, what they have should be followed and obeyed. They make that claim. But somewhere in their personal journey, there's no loyalty to pursue truth.
Right.
So the conversation about truth, what is truth, what is not truth, does truth have a nature, does truth have a prerequisite? So my argument is there a pursuit of truth? And when there's a pursuit for truth, then it becomes loyal. What does that mean in terms of loyalty? So for example, someone will say, what is truth? So I would argue that truth is like a puzzle with multiple parts. And it's complete when you have all the parts. But a person can have some truth. So for example, let's say truth would means it's not snowing now. So if I say it was snowing, that's not true. So truth is not snowing. So the truth means accurately, truthfully, the reality of what is, or what is to be, or what was.
Okay.
So the true history, as far as history. The truth about the reality now, or the truth about what is to be. So that's some kind of definition of truth. Now you also have a truth where, whereby is a desire to be right. I want to be on the side of rightness. So you want to be untrue because you want to be correct. You want to do the right thing. And that could be evolving and changing and developing. So we have development of truth. So as someone will hold this belief now, they hold a particular belief, and their pursuit for truth, they keep changing and evolving and developing. So yes, yeah, that's...
I like the way you phrased the first part of that explanation. So, as you know, I am a student of the philosophy of Zarathustra.
Right.
And I'll talk more about Zarathustra shortly. Zarathustra is the ancient Iranian prophet after whom a religion was named. However, what we have directly from him is a set of hymns or poetic songs which form a philosophical treatise, a philosophical doctrine. Truth is the primary preoccupation of his philosophical ideology.
Okay.
However, in this instance, truth does not simply mean the factual accuracy of a statement.
All right.
Like the example you gave
Yes.
about whether it's snowing or not.
Yeah.
There is a principle in these teachings which is interpreted or translated as truth. There is a word. The word is Asha. Also, another version of this word is Arta. This is not a principle which is unique to Zoroastrianism or to Zarathustra's teachings. It's also present in the Vedic teachings as well, for example, in the Vedas. However, his treatment of this idea is somewhat unique. So Asha, not only does it mean truth, but it means the order of the cosmos, cosmic order,
Yes.
the order of nature, the order of reality, but in its perfected form. So by truth, when we use the word Asha or Arta, we are talking about the best possible reality. We are talking about the actualization of the best possible reality, and therefore the pursuit of that. So it is not, if I describe very briefly the act of creation in the teachings of Zarathustra, Ahura Mazda, God, the ultimate consciousness, thought, let me see, he engendered creation in the process of a thought in his mind. So we have the mental reality. He then undertook a process of making it a physical reality. However, in so doing, Asha, the highest potential state of creation, was not actualized. We don't know why this is. Zarathustra doesn't tell us why. However, the physical world is not in the state of perfection that the mental world is in, the spiritual world, so to speak. Now, there are a couple of different possible explanations for this, but one is that creation is an ongoing process and that it will end when cosmic order is established, when reality reaches its highest possible potential. However, it is the role of mankind to pursue that, to bring that about through truthful behavior.
Okay.
But when I say truthful, I'm talking about pursuing an end which is representative of the best or the highest possible state of things. So where you have two choices, you must pick the one that is most likely to actualize the best possible outcome. That is the truth. That is the essence of the truth. The truth is the best possible outcome, because that is the intended true nature of things. Let me give you a very simple worldly example. If two people are applying for an accountant's job, one of them is highly qualified, has lots of experience, is very well suited to the role, and the other one is inexperienced, not qualified, but extremely physically attractive. And the person who is unqualified and inexperienced and yet very physically attractive gets the role. This is in conflict with Asha, because it is not in line with justice. It is not in line with equity. It is something which is causing injury to one in the benefit of another. Something which is done out of self-interest. These are principles which are in contradiction to the truth. The highest possible moral standard is what truth is, and that's what we should be pursuing. And once we are all in pursuit of this, moving in the same direction, we bring about Asha.
Right.
We will ultimately bring about the highest form of cosmic order. Things will be in the order for which they were intended. So it's a very deep and layered idea, and sometimes when you say truth, people infer it just means 2 + 2 = 4 is a true statement. But it's in this ideology, in this philosophical treatment, it's a much deeper idea.
Is there also an inner truth within the self that can connect to an external truth? So for example, the best truth or the first step to truth is an internal truth purifying the self, which is a bitter truth. So a lot of people cannot access the external truth, because inwardly there's too much of falsehood inside. So, and also there's a bitter truth about ourselves that we're in denial of. So my question to you would be, tell me a little bit more about the Zoroastrian concept of the inner truth.
Well, first of all, it's quite interesting. You included a phrase in your build-up there, the best truth. So we have this word Asha, which, like I said, represents cosmic order. Now, I alluded to the highest form of this cosmic order, which is best truth.
Right.
The Avestan phrase that encompasses this is Asha Vahishta.
Okay.
In modern Persian, it's Ordi Behesht.
All right.
Ordi, you can actually hear it because modern Persian is an Indo-European language. Ordi is order, Behesht is best.
Okay.
So you're actually aiming to bring about best order. But again, it's a much deeper thing than that. It's a cosmic order. It is actualizing the highest potential for reality. I'm sorry to divert there. So you're talking about the inner
truth,
right? So, as far as we know, in recorded history, Zarathustra appeals to the man and the woman to make their choices. But I say for the first time in history because this is a call to the individual, which we don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't have another example of, or an older example of this, because Zarathustra lived in a society that was entirely tribal, which means the tribe made a decision. The tribe decided where their society went. But Zarathustra sends out the call to the individual, and this is the germ, this is the genus for the idea of personal responsibility. You see, he lived in a deterministic or a fatalistic, or a society with a deterministic or fatalistic worldview, where things happened because of the whims and decisions of capricious gods, and no one took personal responsibility for any outcome, even their own behavior.
Right.
So we have this modern concept of personal responsibility, and we look back anachronistically as if this is a very natural thing that people have always believed. But that's not true. So when he said it, we can argue he's the first ever to have said it.
Okay.
That there is a personal, individual responsibility to think about the morality of one's actions. And like I say, core to that, fundamental to that, is one's role in establishing the best cosmic order. In fact, it's described as a war between truth and deceit. So the word for truth, Asha, and deceit is druj, which in modern Persian is durugh, which literally means lie.
Okay.
And these words also have implications in terms of judgment. So again, we are trying to achieve Asha, but we can end up in what is called the house of deceit, the house of druj, at the end of our lives.
Right. So let me ask this question. There's a kind of an Islamic phrase that kind of says, truthfulness brings about righteousness. And righteousness brings about justice. And justice brings about peace and order. So we're talking about peace and order. So if truthfulness brings about righteousness, righteousness brings about justice, and justice brings about peace and order, which you're talking about.
But they are literally all encapsulated in Asha.
In Asha, right. So
they are all synonymous.
The breakdown from
within
this.
Asha. Sorry, yeah.
So most people pursue pleasure.
Right.
And when you're pursuing pleasure, moral duties and responsibilities kind of goes out the door.
Right, yeah.
And we become,
behavior,
become very vicious. And our moral responsibility, that goes out to the door. And truthfulness goes out to the door. So if I'm selling a car and I want to sell my car, so the Islamic guidelines in selling a car, you first inform the buyer of the flaws of the car, the potential flaws of the car first.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the car. So if you're selling an animal, you come and say, well, 6 months ago, that animal had an issue, I sorted it out. Potentially, I cannot see any issues, or there might be issues. So you announce, you make known the flaws of it.
Yeah.
What is that all about? It's in the name of truthfulness.
Yes.
So when you have truthfulness, you have righteousness. When you have righteousness, you get justice. When you have justice, you achieve order
Yeah.
and peace. The highest, the pinnacle of order and peace. How would you respond to that?
Okay, so when Asha is actualized, it is a state in which there is no friction. There is no one thing that happens that causes friction for another thing. There is no, for example, no one will benefit at the cost or the expense of the injury to someone else. So in this analogy that you give, the person who is selling the car, let's say lying by concealment or failure to offer the faults with the car,
Yeah.
stands to gain at the injury of the one buying the car,
Yes.
believing that it is free of faults.
Yeah.
So this is a situation where you would be in the absence of Asha. However,
What is that state called? The absence of Ashara.
so so if we talk about words like good and evil, for example,
All right, okay.
because in Zarathustra's concept, it is never stated that Ahura Mazda or God creates evil. Evil exists where Asha does not.
Okay.
Evil exists where darkness exists where light does not reach. So, ultimately speaking, in an eschatological sense, at the end of time, at the end of days, so to speak,
Yeah.
Asha will be victorious.
Right.
Asha will be victorious. It is man's. We are taking part in an event of choice.
Right.
We choose between good and evil. We choose between Asha and Duruj. So we are given, through the mechanisms of free will, the freedom to choose one or the other. So evil is like I've heard it described as evil being an inherent part of reality. It's inescapable from a physical reality until Asha is fully actualized at the end of time, at the end of history. So what I would call these instances where Asha is not victorious, and maybe in these small battles, is a state of deceit or a state of duruj or duruk in modern Persian.
Okay.
It is the state of the lie.
Right.
It is the opposite of the truth, which is Asha.
How would you relate that, Asha? Am I pronouncing it correct?
Asha, yeah,
Asha.
yeah.
Right. How would you relate that to personal development? Because sometimes we want to make a perfect world, but we ourselves contributing by our behavior, our attitude, we're contributing to making the world a better place, a worse place. So, for example, I may talk righteousness, but when I'm doing business, I practice evil.
Right.
Right. In my home, I may practice evil and tyranny, but I come here talking righteousness.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to the inner personal development, the character development?
Well, first of all, tyranny, hypocrisy, these are all expressions of deceit. These are all expressions of the antithesis of Asha. Now, Zarathustra speaks explicitly about the imperative to self-mastery.
Yes. Okay.
Which means we must overcome those self-serving urges and put righteousness at the forefront of our thinking. So
I like that.
yeah. He also, so you use the word evolution. So that prompts me to mention one of the 7 eternal principles of Zoroastrianism as offered to us by Ahura Mazda, the god of Zarathustra.
Yeah.
Its name is, in the Avestan language, is Spenta Menu.
Okay.
Directly translated, this means the creative, progressive, evolving mentality. So, I mean, again, there's this very small phrase you can spend a lifetime unpacking it.
Yeah.
But it means that life, at its core, it means that there must be a process of evolution. There must be a process of development.
Yes.
That you are not tomorrow going to be the same person you were today. You will be equipped with additional information, additional knowledge, and hopefully you will use that to equip yourself with additional wisdom with which to, firstly, to perform or to take part in this process of self-mastery, ultimately to bring about the victory of Asha.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because in Islam, self-mastery is really important. It's foundation. Character development is very important. And what it actually means, really, is that a person must work very hard in identifying the arrogance within himself.
Yes.
Identify the greed within himself. Identify the selfishness, showing off, the boastful character, and the false, deluded concept of the self. So a lot of people has a deluded concept of who they are.
Yeah.
They have an inflated concept of who they are.
Right.
So they think of themselves 500 times greater than who they really are. And it's sometimes life experiences, trials in life teach us who we really are, teach us our strengths and our weaknesses. So in terms of self-mastery, the Islamic view on that is that the Prophet Muhammad says, the majority of my nation will enter paradise through husnul khuluq, good character. But you cannot achieve good character until we eradicate the self-arrogance, the greed, the boastfulness, the pride. So that is one of the most important aspects of self-development, self-purification, and self-truth. Self-truth.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know if there's an etymological, like linguistic link between these two words, but this idea of deceit, and we absolutely can deceive ourselves, even in the Zoroastrian worldview. That the word druj, which is the deceit, in modern Persian is duruq, seems very close to the word drug. Like we can drug ourselves with these delusions, with these ideas that we can kid ourselves, or that we can kid the ultimate consciousness into believing that we are living righteously when we're not really. And that really we're allowing our self-serving, self-interest,
self-righteous,
to serve or to purport as righteousness. So I 100% believe that the first step is clearing the decks within, getting rid of the self-serving nonsense, putting these principles of righteousness ahead of all else, and we are given the directive to do right for the sake of doing right. It is within the acts of righteousness where we find we find the reward. We're not doing it. Sometimes people get preoccupied with some external reward, even an eschatological reward for doing what we are told is good. But in Zarathustra's words, we are meant to do right because it is right. That's the most important thing, because then you remove the self-serving portion of that. There's no danger that you're doing it for reward per se. The act itself is its own reward. And it's the same with deceit. Even in deceitful behavior, in unjust behavior, the punishment is there. We have the mechanisms within us. We have guilt. We have a conscience. We can be haunted by our guilt and our conscience for doing evil acts. So there is already a built-in mechanism within nature that punishes us and rewards us for evil and for good, respectively.
So, all right, for example, we're talking about the grand truth. So if there's a bottle of alcohol here, and one person says, this alcohol is good for you, everyone should have it. Another person says, well, I'm a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a scientist, so I understand chemicals, and I can tell you, based on my knowledge of your body, and my knowledge of this chemical is bad for you. So ultimately, we would go with the one with more knowledge. So our decision will rely on the one with all knowledge. So from my point of view, God has all the knowledge. He is the creator of everything, and he knows more about the good and the bad endings, beginning. He knows all about it. So when he make a decision about what is good for you, what is bad for you, what is right for you, what is wrong for you in terms of consequences, that becomes our source of trying to be right. So I'm trying to be right, but my source of right would be God, because ultimately He's the all-knowing, and He created us, He knows our purpose, and when we live in out of purpose, we become out of order, and when we out of order, consequences happen. So this becomes our reference. How, from a Zoroastrian point of view, would you kind of create a parallel response?
So what the example you've given is one of a prescription.
Yeah.
But-
Source.
No, but a prescription specifically about the consumption or the not to consume prohibited substances, for example.
Yeah.
Zarathustra does not convey to us any prescriptive legislature as such. The imperative is upon the individual. The imperative is upon his society to establish, first of all, to undertake this process of learning, of understanding his own environment, himself, in this case, his own body, these chemicals that we're consuming, and to begin a process of ethical thinking, to create a methodology for how to establish the rights and wrongs of any given practice. In times gone by, you know, in ancient time, classical times, 2,500 years ago, Persian kings who were ostensibly Zoroastrian would conduct diplomatic meetings 2 days in a row.
Right.
On the first occasion, they would do it under the influence of alcohol. And on the second day, they would meet in complete sobriety, to finalize the agreements struck under the influence, and to apologize for any possible offense that may have been caused under the same influence. The wisdom comes in understanding where the line is between oiling the gears of any given situation. I'm talking specifically about alcohol. I'm personally not a fan. And excess. Now, there is something to be said for outlawing anything which one can easily fall into excess. However, this is not the approach taken by Zarathustra or by the god of Zarathustra. Later, Zoroastrian orthodoxy tried to equip the religion with a huge amount of prescriptive legislation. But Zarathustra himself, whose teachings is what I'm interested in, never said that.
That's fine. But then, if there's an issue of alcohol or issue, I aspire to be right in every walk of my life. I'm aspiring to be right. And to be right, to be upon rightness and righteousness in order to achieve the state of divine, the best course of justice. Right. Now, so the question is, my source will be God.
Yeah.
Because He knows all, He's all-knowing.
Yeah.
What would be the source, from a Zoroastrian point of view, to understand whether things are right or wrong, whether fornication and adultery is right or wrong, whether drinking alcohol is right or wrong, whether whether incest is right or wrong? And I do understand we could look at this from a societal point of view, a historical point of view. So the modern societal point of view on right and wrong might be here. So historically, it's going to be different.
I understand. So someone who believes that they are in possession of divine revelation, which includes prescriptions for these types of things, will be in the belief that they are in possession of objective morality, for example. The type of thinking that Zarathustra puts forward, on the face of it, seems more like a subjective approach.
Okay.
That means the individual must make his mind up about whether what he's doing is right or wrong. But look, not everybody is equal in the sense that, you know, a younger person with less experience is less likely to be equipped in the same way as someone who is older and has been around the block.
More knowledge.
Who has more knowledge.
So more knowledge,
and more wisdom.
More knowledge determines right and wrong.
No. Well, it can influence it, but we're not islands.
Right.
We are not we are not necessarily on our own here. So yes, the journey begins with reflection, with inward reflection. But then two people like you and I will get together and have a discussion, because if I'm not sure, I should talk to someone. And we can go to someone else with more knowledge, because the family framework is also important. We go to our elders for wisdom,
Guidance
for
and
guidance,
yeah.
and so on. It all starts on the personal level. You just use the divining rods, which are your sense of conscience, your sense of guilt, your innate sense of what's right and wrong. And then you go to exterior sources to acquire
Is it experimental?
more information.
Problematic. I find it problematic.
I think at the end of I don't want to get too bogged down in the theology or the philosophy of the claims about objective morality. But the reality is that despite being in possession of what one might believe is objective morality, we have only an objective set of senses with which to deal with that information.
Okay.
So even something which is claimed to be objective, we must interpret ourselves. You're still going to interpret it through your eyes and mind in a slightly different way to how someone else will. But I think there are some views on morality which generally we can agree on, like the idea of murder, for example, or unjust killing or unprovoked killing. I personally don't need to be in possession of a prescription from heaven to know that that's
Right.
that's wrong.
Right.
But yes, we don't have a set of objective.
But then if Zoroastrians
rulings.
don't have, that's fine. But then if one choose as a Zoroastrian to acknowledge that God is all-knowing, and therefore if he's all-knowing, whatever he says has to be right without me experimenting right and wrong. So for example, if there's any moral issue, whatever that issue is, and 1 century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century keep changing and evolving on their moral compass, their moral measurement of right and wrong. But ultimately, when they come right back to the conclusion of 10 centuries of right and wrong, they come to align that what God says of right and wrong as morally, that's the right one. So as a Zoroastrian, you will not have a problem with that, because it's not prescribed. We talk about experimental
about the progressive
morality.
progressive
Yeah.
approach to morality.
Yeah.
But I don't have a problem with it, because, like I said, progressiveness, the progressive mentality is foundational to Zarathustra's thinking. However, again, I don't think that unprovoked, unjust killing
or
will
rape
ever be right.
That's
You know?
clear cut.
Yeah.
No, that's a bit clear cut.
Right.
But there are some things that are not clear cut.
But even today, there are societies that differ on things. But my personal belief, because so far I've just tried to convey what is taught to us by Zarathustra, but my personal belief is if we are not expected to use our minds and to use our sense of right and wrong, our sense of conscience and guilt and so on, then why do we have them? Why would we have them?
But the question is how you use it. Because you can use your mind 2 ways.
Yeah.
For example, if you read the Quran, Allah commands you to use your mind.
Yeah.
But he commands you to use your mind, meaning to say, I am first, and use your mind to understand the virtues and the benefits of what I'm trying to say. But don't put your mind...
I mean specifically in terms of moral decisions.
Right.
As in you have the rulings for moral decisions.
Right.
So I'm saying you're not required even to understand why something is prescribed to be right or wrong. You just have to follow it.
Where?
I'm saying, like for example, the ruling on alcohol. You don't need to understand why.
What do you mean?
Okay, you have a ruling that the consumption of alcohol is prohibited.
Yes. From an Islamic point of
Yes,
view.
but do you need to understand why?
Yes.
Or you have to understand why the ruling has been made?
Well, yes.
Okay, because I don't know. I'm not aware of I wasn't aware of that. So if you can.
The Quran make
enlighten
it
me
quite
on that.
clear that in alcohol there's some benefits.
Right.
But because the harm outweigh the benefits, Allah has forbidden it.
Okay.
Right. So the Quran make it clear. Now,
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is there's no like deeper explanation. It's just this has just been decided.
it's decided by God, and what God does, God opens the door.
Yeah.
He gives you a command,
Yeah.
and He opens the door to have a debate with you to show you why this is beneficial to you.
Yeah, so we can explore.
So you use your brain,
Yes.
but you use your brain not on top of the legislation of God.
Yeah.
You use your brain to examine the reasons, purpose, and benefits why God commands what He commands.
But the confirmation of that may not be present. We may speculate on whether how we've thought about this ruling may have come about. But where would we get confirmation that our process of trying to understand it is correct?
Very simple. Most of the times, God give mankind a command, and mankind say, "No, I'm not with that." Right. That's one. Mankind decides to do his own thing. When consequences happen, then mankind understand the consequences of its actions. So, for example, you look at alcohol. God forbid it, according to the Quran, not according to some understandings of Christianity. Christian world's divided on it. Some say yes, some say no. They're divided on it. That's fine. But the question is, we will argue, all right, alcohol is wrong. Why? Look at the consequences of alcohol throughout the history. Look at the consequence of alcohol-related crimes in the UK. Alcohol-related accidents in the UK. Alcohol-related rape cases. I mean, we're talking about people who just literally kill themselves on alcohol for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So the question of right and wrong, God will legislate what is right and what is wrong, and He invites you to examine right and wrong through the consequences of your hands.
But ultimately, He's done the work for you in creating the
Exactly.
legislation. So
Yes, sir.
how Zarathustra, how his teachings would approach that is that we would establish, we would come to understand that living in excess is wrong. It is against Asha, because living in excess in terms of alcohol, for example, leads to higher crime rates, leads to reckless behavior, and so on. And I think that in reality, in the fullness of time, we would be able to work out, you know, even British society has gone in a certain direction. Once upon a time, drinking and driving was not illegal. Then it became illegal, and then it became more restrictive. So I'm saying, yes, there could have just been had it been a Islamic country, for example, it may just have been outlawed from the get-go.
And then what we would have done, this is forbidden in Britain, drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
And then look at countries where it's pell-mell free. Look at the consequences. So in Islam, Allah says, I give you a ruling, I give you a prescription, I order you to obey me, which is good for you. And if you defer, look at nations who were destroyed by disobedience to me.
Right, I understand what you're saying. Again, I think there is a great amount of value in being given a methodology in how to establish the rights and wrongs of any given situation. I think that there's more work for us to do in that situation. I think that more responsibility is put on us, but I don't mind that. That's not the thing. Is we're not all built for that.
Right.
So I understand.
But
the
there are many
benefits.
casualties.
I understand the
There are
benefits.
many casualties. So if God give you a lifespan of 500 years, and you have to govern a great society, big society for 500 years. Let's look at a country with a large population. And your moral guide for 500 years has to be experimental. Meaning to say, you have to check it out, you have to try it, you have to test it. Look at how much casualties are going to suffer only because you have to try it, you have to test it out, you have to feel it, you have to examine it, all these
But I would
different things.
counter that.
However,
I would counter you on
right?
that.
However, if you go by God's rule, because He's all-knowing, He's all-loving, and He is there to help you and protect you from yourself, wherever you go around the globe in morality, you're coming right back to what He says was best.
So how I would challenge that is, first of all, according to your ideology, God didn't send that prescription at the beginning of time. He sent it at a point in time after which lots of catastrophic behavior had already taken place, alcohol caused. Would you agree with that?
Not really.
But I mean, there was a process of experimentation was already allowed.
Okay.
Even by God, because He didn't reveal in Islam this particular prescription was not revealed until 1400 years ago. you understand?
Yeah, I understand what
As
you're
in,
saying.
it was even the prohibition of alcohol. We started off talking about a much more kind of
But it's
broad.
linked back to something.
Yeah.
We just on the alcohol as a sample.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The prescription to prohibit alcohol even appears as an abrogation of an earlier, less strict ruling, right?
Okay, yeah.
In
I'm following you.
in Islam.
Sort of.
Okay, correct me.
So what I'm trying to say, previous nations,
Yeah.
all of them were forbidden. Intoxication was forbidden to them.
Would you
All the
say
previous
all
nations.
nations.
Like all the previous prophets before Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, but the prophets hold on. You mean all 125,000 prophets?
All of them, to the best of my knowledge, intoxication were forbidden to them. When Islam came to the Arabs with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not start with prohibition of alcohol.
Right.
He started with connecting the hearts to God, inviting the hearts to make a connection with God, and teaching them about the knowledge of the hereafter and the impact. And when mankind get their hearts connected to God, then God prohibited alcohol in a process. So he used to say, do not come to the prayer when you're intoxicated.
Yeah.
And then eventually come and say, in alcohol, there's some good in it, but majority of it is bad for you. So on this time, I forbid it. But previously, in previous nations before, the nation of Noah, as far as we know, intoxication was always prohibited. But I understand what you're saying.
I'm with you when you talk about, we can, for example, consult the statistics on certain phenomena related to alcohol around the world. We can look at that and we can say whether alcohol has a positive or negative effect. But I can't go with you down that path of, well, we know that all past prophets said this. Unless I have the evidence to corroborate that.
Yeah.
So,
no,
but I understand the
it's just a
overarching.
conversation.
Yeah, I understand the overarching point you're making.
It's a conversation we have it, and in the conversation, we just trying to establish a person desire to be right and to be upon rightness and to be truthful and to be upon truthfulness, and your personal pursuit for truthfulness, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna sidqa yahdi ila al-birri." وَإِنَّ الْبِرَّ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ. So truthfulness leads to righteousness, and righteousness leads to paradise. So there is a religious view that everyone who believes in God should pursue truthfulness. And there's an inner truthfulness one must desire, as you correctly described, mastering the self. So defeating the arrogance, defeating the greed, defeating the boastfulness, the attitude of lording oneself over another person. We have to defeat that. And defeating that means to say we will embrace or we will achieve some sort of truthfulness. And when we pursue and we are loyal to truth, that truth will take us where God wants us to be, the destination, the ultimate destination. So that's important. But I'm only saying this because in the pursuit of truthfulness, the one who has all the cards to truth, the one who knows all about truthful behavior and righteous behavior would be God. So he becomes the source because he is the truth. He is the most truthful. So as we pursue the path to truth, we embrace all of his rulings and his prescriptions in order to reach him in that state. You get what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're saying. I mean, this is a
source. It's a matter of source.
It's quite and if you don't mind me saying so, an Abrahamic approach. I mean, a lot of people hate that term, but
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. This idea of a direct transmission to mankind of a sort of list, like a list of prescriptions and rulings and so on. I just don't come from a worldview where that's something that exists.
Okay.
I feel like Zarathustra may have received divine revelation. Certainly the hymns with which he came down his mountain are the work of a genius. What's his name? I forget the name of the scholar who talks about the construction, the linguistic techniques that are used. he sees them certainly as a work of genius, and even he is in two minds. As a non-Zoroastrian, he's in two minds as to whether this is something that Zarathustra spent 10 years in the mountains devising himself, or whether he was in receipt of something from a higher authority. So, that's something that we dwell upon.
Well, the
But
thing about this,
it didn't come with, like I say, these types of rulings per se.
yeah. All right, let's assume that. But I want to add some strength to the point you're making. If Zarathustra came with something great that lasted for so many centuries, well, other beliefs,
Millennia.
yeah, exactly, and not just that, based on the knowledge you imparted, it influenced a lot of Judaism, a lot, and not just that, the Greek world will claim royalty and greatness. A lot of them has been influenced by the Persian Zoroastrian beliefs. It's either he's a genius, and all genius get a gift from God, or he received revelation from God. And if he did in fact receive revelation, which I want to believe that he received revelation from God, it means to say he received it from the one who has all the information about correctness, rightness, and perfect order. Has to be.
Now that we're coming to this point in the conversation, I don't want to attempt to quote it off the top of my head.
Right.
So Zarathustra is familiar to people in the Western world, and maybe not to many people in the Western world, but to those to whom he's familiar, he is familiar to them because of the work of someone like Friedrich Nietzsche, who was a philosopher, existentialist, I think from the 19th century. So and because of his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Okay, yeah.
Where he uses Zarathustra as his mouthpiece.
And he went in the mountains as well.
Yeah. But he uses him as a mouthpiece. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes. He uses him as a mouthpiece in this particular book to critique Christianity, and maybe to
went into a cave as well.
Who?
In the mountain. Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah. I think he was trying to recreate some.
And he said that angel spoke to him.
Yeah. He also was a very sick man in his later life, but
half his life he was mentally sick.
I want to. So I'll give a quotation from his book Ecce Homo.
Okay.
So my question is, why did Nietzsche choose this name Zarathustra, or this figure, to be his mouthpiece of his ideas?
Right.
So in Ecce Homo, Nietzsche writes, "People have never asked me, as they should have done, what the name of Zarathustra precisely means in my mouth, in the mouth of the first immoralist," because Nietzsche didn't believe that there was anything inherently moral in reality. For that which distinguishes this Persian from all others in the past is the very fact that he is the exact reverse of an immoralist. Zarathustra was the first to see the struggle between good and evil, the essential wheel in the working of things. The translation of morality into the world of metaphysics as force, cause, and in itself in his work, but the very question suggests its own answer. Zarathustra created this most portentous of errors, morality. This is obviously from the view of Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Therefore, he must be the first to expose it. Not only because he had a longer and greater experience of the subject than any other thinker, all of history is indeed the experimental refutation of the theory of the so-called moral order of things, but because of the more important fact that Zarathustra was the most truthful of thinkers, and his teaching alone is truthfulness, upheld as the highest virtue. That is to say, as the reverse of the cowardice of the idealist who takes to his heels at the sight of reality, Zarathustra has more pluck in his body than all other thinkers put together. To tell the truth and to aim straight, that is the first Persian value. Have I made myself clear? The overcoming of morality by itself through truthfulness, the moralist's overcoming of himself and his opposite, and me. That is what the name Zarathustra means in my mouth.
Awesome. So final words?
The truth, the word for truth from the mouth of Zarathustra encapsulates all virtue, justice, equity, equality, honesty.
Self-mastery.
Self-mastery is the mechanism by which we achieve these things.
Yes.
And I think this is a common theme amongst many ideologies, world religions, and so on. And I think that this is something that most of us can agree upon despite our differences. And so I think that truthfulness, the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of establishing reality in the order for which it was intended is something that we should come together to try to achieve.
Awesome. Lovely. I enjoy that. Thanks a lot. Test the claim. Like, subscribe, and
Abdullah,
leave your comments, please.
Street lights.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
Thank you, brother.
That was good. How long did we go for? Oh,
51 minutes.
see? And we only planned to go for 20 minutes. And you were complaining. "Oh, I need to be back."